Very good afternoon to all of you. I welcome you all to this very special 131st session of Leadership Talk. I welcome all our key speakers for this very special session. Matthew Johnson, Dr. Geeta Shukla ma'am, Dr. Rajneesh Kumar Khan sir, Nirima Robinson ma'am, Geeta Rathodi ma'am, Reena Verma ma'am. I also welcome other participants for joining us and making this the 131st session truly special. As you all have received the flow for the session, we'll begin the session with the formal introduction of our key speakers. And then I'll come back to our key speakers for the opening remark. And in the next part for the main talk. And in the last part, that would be an open house. We have already received many questions. So I would be presenting those questions to our key speakers for their perspective and comments. And after that, we'll end the session with their concluding remarks. So now, before we formally begin the session, with the formal introduction of our key speakers, I would like to share the background of these talks. In fact, when draft document of national education policy had come out few years back, even then we had gone to different cities. We had organized multiple interactions with many education leaders across country, and collectively we had shared hundreds of sessions with the MHRD, CBSE, and other stakeholders. So when this final policy was released in the last week of July, since then we have spoken with hundreds of education leaders, and we realized that at one side this policy has raised enthusiasm, positivity among all the stakeholders. At the same side, a lot of people are apprehensive about education. Many believe education is going to be very, very challenging. Many people who have participated share that finance, teachers training, there are many concern areas. So with that thought, we realized that we must invite all these stakeholders from school education, higher education on a single platform to understand their perspective. And if we can create a roadmap in collaboration for the successful implementation of this policy. So now, with that thought, we had launched our first session on August 26th. And here we are today with our 131st session. So now please allow me to share my screen. Will formally begin the session with the formal introduction of our key speakers. So here I'm sharing my screen. So as you know that these sessions are being organized by India International Education Council and School Lalaji Solutions. India International Education Council is a not-for-profit organization which is working in the field of education. It has collaborators from 12 countries. It aims to create a better world through education, building quality centers for elementary education approachable for all kids, finding best educational practices across the globe, and find ways to implement those in Indian institutions. Creating more awareness on hygiene and learning disabilities is another aim of India International Education Council. It publishes a magazine called World Education Review and many other educational reports. It aims to build 100 chapters in different cities by 2022. It will soon open its membership for institutions and individuals. It also imparts training for leaders, teachers, students, and parents. As you know that we have so far conducted 130 sessions, at this platform. We have received 15,281 registrations, 14,019 questions on national education policy. We have seen participation from 5 countries, India, USA, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Nepal. From India, we have seen participation from 22 states and 98 cities. We aim to organize minimum 200 sessions. With this, we would be, reaching out to 100,000 educators, 20,000 institutions, and 1,000 plus eminent speakers. Like today's speakers would be joining us to share their perspective and thoughts on our national education policy. Now, I would request you all, please join me in welcoming our key speakers for this very special 131st session. Our first key speaker, a very senior education leader, Matthew P. Johnson. Matthew sir is the headmaster with the Bishop Cotton School, Shimla, Himachal Pradesh. He graduated with honors in history from Scottish Church College before taking a master's degree in ancient Indian history and culture from Calcutta University. He joined the Bishop Cotton School in 1994. He also worked with other prestigious schools like the Assam Valley School for 5 years and the Paul's Mission School, Scotland Lane, Kolkata. We welcome you, Matthew sir. Thank you for joining. It's an honor to have you. Our next key speaker, another very senior and eminent education leader, Dr. Geeta Shukla ji. Dr. Geeta is the principal with Manav Bharati India International School, Dehradun, Uttarakhand. She is an educator, critical thinker, change catalyst, and a problem solver. She has experience of over 37 years in the field of education. She has conducted over 70 workshops for teachers and students. She is an expert, parenting coach, and child development specialist. She has received many awards and recognition for her contribution to the field of education. We welcome you, Geeta ma'am. Thank you for joining. It's an honor to have you. Our next key speaker, Dr. Rajneesh Kumar Kern, sir. Rajneesh ji is the director with Patel College of Science and Technology, Bhopal, Madhya Pradesh. He did his BTech from NIT Bhopal in 2002, MTech in 2006, and PhD in 2014 from NIT Bhopal. He has overall 17 years of teaching experience. He has published more than 20 research papers. He has authored 2 books on basic electronics and electrical instrumentation. He has received a research grant under TEQIP for various projects. He is an active member with IEEE, Institution of Engineer, Computer Society of India, Association Computer Machinery, Indian Science Congress Association, among others. We welcome you, Rajneesh sir. Thank you for joining. It's an honor to have you. Our next speaker, Ms. Nilima Robinson. Nilima ji is principal with the Star Hybrid School, Gorakhpur, Uttar Pradesh. She has done MA in English and BEd. She has 15 years of experience in the field of education. She has received many awards and recognition for her contribution to the field of education. Our next speaker, another senior education leader, Anita Rathodi ma'am. Anita ji is principal with the Foothills Academy, Rishikesh, Uttarakhand. Foothills Academy is one of the prestigious and renowned schools of Rishikesh and is known for its quality education and comprehensive grooming of students. Prior to this, she has worked with many other prestigious schools of Dehradun and Delhi, like Army Public School, Dehradun, Anglo-Indian Public School, Ma Anandbai Memorial School, Dehradun. She completed her graduation from Muradabad and Dehradun. She has done her master's degree in English and economics. She also has degree of BEd and MEd. She has also completed a diploma course in counseling and guidance from IGNOU. Currently, she's also working as secretary of CBSE Sahodaya School Complex, Rishikesh. She has very enriching experience of 18 years in the field of education. In 2016, she has been appointed as a trainer by CBSE. Then she has conducted more than 1,000 capacity building programs in different schools of India. She has been awarded with many prestigious awards like Stri Shakti Samman, Bharatiya Nari Ratna Award, National School Award as Outstanding School Leader in the month of January 2020 by the International United Educationist Fraternity. We welcome you, Anita ma'am. Thank you for joining. It's an honor to have you. And our last key speaker for this very special session, Reena Verma ji. Reena ji is the Managing Director with Vinayak International School, Bareilly, Uttar Pradesh. She has decades of experience in the field of education. She has done diploma in elementary education, teachers orientation program with CBSE, diploma in system development and management, CISM's schools of computing, Bachelor of Arts. She has received many prestigious awards like Best Teacher of the Year, which was awarded by Student Welfare Society, Bareilly, Teacher in Charge for Unified Council, Hyderabad Maths and Science Olympiad, Teacher in Charge, she has been with the Science Olympiad Foundation. She's also received the award for Best Debater during her college years at Delhi University in 1986-7 for Hindi debate. We welcome you, Reena ma'am. Thank you for joining. It's an honor to have you. Now, with this, we come to the next part of this, this 131st session. I would request all our key speakers if we can have your quick 1-minute opening remark before I come back to you for your main talk. So I would request first, Matthew sir, if we can have your opening remark first.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here on this panel and talking about the national education policy. Actually, even though I've been through it and it's very, very comprehensive, in the principles part of the introduction to the policy, a number of things have been mentioned, but one of the most important things which is not actually spoken about in detail is about emotional security and the self-identity of children in school today, especially in big day schools in the big cities. And I'm going to be talking a little bit about that and how that can be addressed in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew sir. We all are very excited to hear your opinion. Welcome back to you. Now I would request Geeta ma'am, we can have your opening remarks.
Good afternoon, everyone. First, I want to thank IIEC for giving me this platform to share my understanding of NEP 2020 with all of you. It's a great honor to share the platform, to share the panel with Matthew sir, Reena ma'am, Nilima ma'am, Anita ma'am, and Rajneesh sir. NEP is dealing very extensively in the area of inclusive education and equity. There are many schools, and most of the schools are trying to be inclusive. And lately, this trend has, or this area where people are becoming more conscious about the involvement of the schools is increasing. Still, there is a lot to do. So today I'll be speaking on sharing my thoughts on the same topic, equity and inclusiveness in education. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Geeta ma'am. I'll come back to you for your detailed interpretation. Now, I would request Rajneesh sir, sir, if we can have your opening remark.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon to all of you. I feel very much honored to be here, one of the team member in this discussion on education policy, new education policy. Actually, being in higher education, I will say that the current education policy which we are following, there is a huge gap between the curriculum and the industry requirement. So, so many people are unemployed. This new education policy has shown us some hope because in case of higher education, government has recommended so many things which will help, especially vocational courses at the school level, at college level. So it will make students employable for the industry. So I think this national education policy is wonderful for when we talk about the higher education. Similarly, so many other regulatory commission like AICT, UGC, NAC, there are so many different regulatory committees. In higher education, government has in this new education policy, government has decided to make one regulatory commission, that is National Higher Education Regulatory Commission. So it is also a very good remark, and it will help in this higher education policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajneesh sir. We'll come back to you to learn more from your perspective. Now, I would like to request, I just would like to check first, Nilima ji, do we have your presence? I am told that you are facing some technical glitch. Have you joined Nilima ji, or do we have your presence? Nilima Robinson ji? No, I believe she here to join. I would request Anita Rathori ma'am. Anita ji, if we can have your opening remark.
Good afternoon, everybody. Am I audible?
You're audible, ma'am.
First of all, thank you, IIEC, to provide all of us, I think, this prestigious platform where we can express our views on very much needed topic, that is NEP 2020. So we all are discussing it many times, but still, as much as we discuss, we understand it more. And today, actually, here in this platform, I'll be talking the topic, same Geeta Shukla ma'am is talking, that is inclusion and equity in education, which is really a very required topic, I feel. We all talk about the inclusion, but whom to be included? This question always remains empty and unanswered. So I feel this is a very good platform where we can talk about the inclusion and equity. Thank you very much once again. That's all.
Thank you, Anita ma'am. I'll come back to you for your main talk. Now I would request Reena ji. And before I invite Reena ji, I must recognize the presence of Sunita Rawat ma'am, Principal Anwar School, Dehradun. Welcome, Sunita ji. Thank you for joining. And now I would invite Reena ma'am for her opening remark.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I
Yes, ma'am.
able to hear me? I'm audible?
Yes, you are
Okay.
audible.
Okay. I'm Reena Verma from Bareilly, and today the topic which I'm going to share with you on the early childhood care national challenge with global perspective, setting and stage. On this topic, I would like to talk to you because when we talk about the good education or for the early child education, so we found that at the rural areas, things are not compatible. Students are not getting the things which they are, which we should provide them. On these topics, I want to go to share my views. Thank you.
Thank you, Reena ji. I'll come back to you. Now, with this, we come to the next part of this session, which is the main talk session. I would invite all our key speakers once again for their detailed perspective. But before I invite our first speaker, Matthew sir, I would like to share the learnings which we have had during our last 130 sessions. You know, during our last sessions, we have learned almost all the educator, all the participants who participated shared that this is a wonderful document. This document, National Education Policy, has a potential to place India at that coveted position of Vishwa Gyan Guru if executed well. Yes, sir, this was a key word. Almost every participant shared that this is such an ambitious document. It is going to be very, very challenging in terms of execution. Many people also cited the example of CCE, that it was also a wonderful initiative but got failed due to poor execution. Many edu leaders who participated shared their assessment that teachers training is going to be a key concern area. Many educators said that teachers training is a concern area, but the bigger concern area is lack of intent among teachers to get trained. A lot of people said that finance is going to be a concern area. Many believe that good schools in urban areas already implementing many of these ideas. So biggest challenge would be for rural schools, budget schools, and government schools. Many people who participated also shared that this pandemic has exposed the poor distribution of digital infrastructure in our country. So that is going to be another key challenge. So, with this, I would request all our key speakers that while sharing your perspective, while sharing your thought, if you can also suggest some idea, some solution, or some best practice which you are implementing in your respective institution, so that we can all learn from each other and this session, become more useful and engaging for all of us. So with that thought, I would request and invite our first key speaker, Matthew John sir. Matthew sir, over to you.
Thank you. I know that the topic that I'm going to talk about today, as I said, has not been covered in very much detail. And we do have a tendency when we talk about education, especially in school, to think in terms of academic knowledge and skills. However, these academic knowledge and skills are not very easily absorbable by children in a situation where there is either a greater amount of tension or where the children are not emotionally secure. Now, when I talk about emotional security, I'm not going to be talking about the safety within school as such, as I will be talking about the safety of students in general. I'll get into my talk now. Most young people today feel a helpless frustration in their lives, which are not under their own control, and in which they are forced down paths and life choices with no reference to their own dreams. Almost none, especially in cities, have an adult with whom they are free enough to talk freely. Teachers in urban schools do not talk to their students most of the time or bother to get to know them. Their job has become to deliver the syllabus. Knowing them, what their situation is, what their fears and what their hopes are, that's above the teacher's pay grade. And after all, isn't that supposed to be the parent's job? Most parents don't study parenting. In the past, in India, joint families provided two very valuable things that are unavailable in nuclear families today: the experience and wisdom of a number of elders, and usually more than one sibling with whom to bond and share. The importance of these is felt only in their absence. In today's urban middle class family, where parents are often both too busy to spend time with their children, and in a situation where the child spends only an average of 4 or 5 waking hours at home, the pressure of marks for college and other kind of entries for tertiary education, many important skills and abilities are increasingly ignored in schools. This leaves us with a growing number of educated young people who are unable to learn or research on their own. They are unable to solve problems or to work in groups. They are dependent on others for their decision making and unable to think for themselves. Rules and systems and documents are not going to be the answer to everything. People are the most important. I have found that choosing a teacher who has genuine affection for children is usually better than choosing one whose subject knowledge is fantastic, but who's disinterested in the students in the classroom. But at the same time, I will always also say that it's possible to train teachers to behave in a certain way. It helps to have an ethos document for teachers. How are teachers supposed to behave? We are not talking about staff regulations. We are talking more about a code of conduct. All old things are not necessarily outdated. Many schools, especially residential schools like the one where I work now, have a system of staff mentorship or house parenting, where every student is attached to a teacher who is responsible for that student's well-being. It usually works better when a teacher mentors the same group of students over a longer period of time, sometimes as much as 4 or 5 years. This seems to actually work very well in Finland, where primary school teachers stay with their students for as long as 6 or 7 years. In schools where you have house systems and student leadership systems like the prefectorial system, and where these systems have evolved over a long period of time, we also find student mentoring, peer tutoring, both for academics as well as for co-curricular activities, a sense of kinship and family within the house and the class. This provides a huge emotional support for today's teenagers. For a greater part, these systems have not been introduced as an experiment, but they were born out of necessity and have evolved and adapted as time and society has changed and developed. Therefore, they are tried, tested, and quite effective. A study done around 2 or 3 years ago in India itself shows that students who are able to communicate freely with their elders, whether we are speaking about parents or teachers, perform better both inside the classroom as well as outside. Communication is the most important thing between a teacher and a student, and these are the two key people in any educational system, the teacher and the student. Encouraging students to work out answers to their own problems and setting tasks without dictating methods can increase self-confidence and boost emotional security. But it does mean giving up a certain degree of control on the part of the teacher. Here is where trust comes in. At every level in a school, this means relying on two-way communication instead of giving orders and instructions. The adults, that is the teachers here, become catalysts rather than dictators. It also ends up becoming a situation where students take ownership of tasks and duties. They take responsibility for it, and they understand whom they are answerable to for the completion of the task. When this process involves a group instead of just an individual, it also develops social and cross-cultural skills. It develops an openness of mind and a willingness to accept things which may be strange and different, and learn real respect for others and become more open to learning new ideas. This is one of the most important things that's mentioned actually in the national education policy. There isn't any limit to this kind of learning. The desire to achieve has to be built with encouragement and with constructive criticism. And I would like to add here that we also need to avoid the dangerous practice of praising everything that students do, even when it's not good. Many of us will be familiar with a poem by Charles Osgood called Pretty Good. Praising students for work which is not good is almost as damaging as finding fault or criticizing children without giving them an option of how to improve. Making life at school emotionally secure and culturally vibrant will automatically result in better performances. This has to come from trust and affection. Some teachers seem to instinctively know that students will work harder if they love and respect you. And the only way to earn that love and respect from students is to give it to them first. We all remember for our whole lives those teachers who treated us as people and as children, rather than the ones who were really good at their subject. We remember the ones who asked us why we were crying during short break. We may not remember the ones who didn't even know our names when they asked us questions in class. The key to emotional security in a school can only be provided by teachers, not out of duty, but out of nature and habit. But both habit as well as nature are also things that can be learned. Security can also come from familiarity, like you have school uniform worn the right way. You have classrooms which are organized in a particular way. The manner in which work has to be done and presented, lining up to leave a classroom, wishing the teacher when the teacher enters the class, wishing each other, all these things, the right school habits lead to a sense of security and identity, knowing what to do in a situation. I know how to write my questions and answers. I know the format. Or I know how I'm supposed to present my homework to a particular teacher. Some may be very general, some may be school specific or teacher specific, but they all contribute to a sense of belonging to the school and to the class, an identification with the class or the institution, which ironically leads eventually to the development of individuality and encourages difference in opinion while maintaining respect. A classroom in a typical Indian school usually would hold at least 40 students of different backgrounds, different speeds of learning, not to talk about different ways of learning. A teacher would find it difficult to cater to this number in the limited time given, and very often will fall back on two methods, either rote learning or method learning. And this weakness creeps up all the way from primary and junior school to senior school. If children can be taught to understand concepts and how to structure conclusions, it makes life easier for teachers in the long run. The answer actually lies, at least partly, in the shortening of the content of the syllabus without reducing the number of concepts that need to be learned. Learning goals need to be achieved by students rather than work being completed by teachers. Learning format and structure at lower levels of school, junior levels, can help later on. If a child is taught how to answer a question instead of what to write when they are 7 or 8 years old, they won't need to learn answers by heart when they are 11 or 12 years old, and they will be able to study and understand topics instead of preparing questions and answers when they have to give their board examinations. And more importantly, these are skills which they will need throughout their lives, not only to pass examinations. I would presume that with the right kind of teachers at junior school and high school levels, the change might begin to show in as short a time as a few months. But for the culture of an entire school or a city or a country to change, we're looking at a longer period of time. And who's going to judge how successful a program like this, and how is it going to be judged? The spectrum involved is subjective in the extreme. You can't use statistics to judge whether a school is successful in providing emotional security to its students. Do we only look at whether children are happy to come to school? Some children will always be happy to come to school. Some children will hate going to school. In all schools, there will be some people who love it and some people who don't. Counting numbers is not going to give us the answer. And if we look at what happens to those students when they become adults, we end up judging the school the way it was 10 years before, not the way that it is now. Perhaps the best idea at this situation with our new education policy in place is not to quantify too much, but simply to keep trying to do what we feel as individuals and people who have chosen this profession is right, not only for the school as a whole, but also for each student as an individual. And let us keep in mind that the reason for any school's existence is the benefit of the student. And the Latin root of that word, benefit, means do good to. If we keep that in focus, we can't go too far wrong. I'd like to end by thanking the IIEC and the World Education Review and School Lalaji for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on this topic with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Matthew sir, for sharing these wonderful thoughts. In fact, you presented the ideal template of learning, with the perspective of this national education policy. You began by saying the teachers' focus. Should today's we have the big challenge. The teachers' focus is not knowing their students, and they have this completing this syllabus. You also talked about why our education system needs to empower itself with the nuclear family challenges which we have in current societal system and setup. You also talked about the importance of for schools to find ways to inculcate leadership quality among our learners. You also talked about that today's the students don't come to teachers to seek information. So teachers should not treat them as an instructor. They should treat them as they must see them as facilitator. In fact, a very senior education leader also participated few sessions back. He said, like, today's students have far bigger resources for information than teachers. So they come to teachers for the perspective. They don't come to teachers for the information alone. So, you also talked about why teachers need to have tools and they need to use those tools in right way. You shared the example of appreciation, how appreciation at right time can, can increase productivity, and at the wrong, if it is done in a wrong way, it can certainly decrease the efficiency. You also talked about the social values, the importance of those values, and how they can create the impact. And in the end, you talked about the need to empower students so that they can explore their own solutions rather than focusing upon the rote learning way of teaching. Big thanks, Matthew sir, for sharing these very valuable thoughts. I would come back to you with questions. Thank you, sir. Now, with this, I would request Geeta Shukla ma'am, Geeta ma'am, if we can have your ideas, your thoughts.
Yes, thank you. I'll be sharing my thoughts. As I told, that the topic for discussion for me will be that every learner matters, inclusion and equity in education. So I will be dividing my discussion in few parts. For example, initially I'll be discussing what do we mean by inclusion and equity and why that is needed. Then what a national education policy says about the current proposed education system. And then we will be looking at the groups which are falling behind and there is a gap in their learnings, the reason behind that disparity, and then I'll be ending by the recommendations which has been given by NEP 2020. So coming to the next point, that is inclusion. What do we understand by the inclusion? So inclusion for me is the education that is for everyone. Now it is not only bringing everyone to the school community, but bringing them to be accepted, to be acknowledged, and to be encouraged to excel, to be better than what they were a day back, a month back, or a year back. Educational setting may be similar for all, and of course should be similar for all. Inclusion does not mean that some people are to be left out because they are not able to reach to the school. So inclusion means that we need to provide provisions for those people also to reach to the school. Data shows that only 1.1% of differently abled children are enrolled. And when it comes to dropouts, because of those dropouts, because they are not able to live comfortably, they are not acknowledged, they are not supported, the dropout rates for them, and after that, they remain only 0.25% in school. Only 0.25% remain in the school. So only 1.1% coming and remaining 0.25% in the school. That is really a sign of alarm, and it should wake us all that we need to bring. Where are all those children lost? Where are they? We need to count them and bring them in our education. The next comes is the equity. Many times we confuse educational equity with educational equality. The two terms are different. Educational equality is providing all the resources to all the students. And educational equity is providing the resources depending on the need of the student. So, for example, the parents are completely capable of giving education to their children, their girl child also. What is the use of giving free education to that particular girl child? Instead of that, giving more resources to the girls of the families who are taken out of the education system and put to earn for the families. So distributing resources, keeping in mind the need of the children, is the educational equity. And we need to keep that in mind, that if we want to use our resources wisely, intelligently, and make the people use of it most, then we need to keep equity in our mind and keep equality a bit away from that. Now here I'll share the data that says that 19.6%, only 19.6% of SC, ST and OBC enroll at primary level. There is a huge gap, only 19.6%. And many of them, they are the dropouts by the time they reach to secondary level. So only 17.3% goes to higher secondary level. So see, again, the huge gap is there. 19.6% only enrolling, and then we could only retain 17.3% for higher education. For secondary education, forget about the higher education. That is another issue. Now comes the point, sorry, what national education policy says. When I look at national education policy, I feel that this is one policy which is taking care of a child when the child is born till a child becomes adult, and even at that stage, not disconnecting. So NEP is talking about early childhood care and education. And for that, it is decided that children of the play group, that is from 3 years to 8 years, are taken care by the education system. Earlier, they were not there. So, for example, earlier NCERT was taking care of the education of the children from grade 1. Now, NCERT will be planning for the education of even the lower age group. That is the early ECCE, which we call. Also, this education policy is taking care of the gap between the secondary education and the higher education, and is taking care that if and when the children want to go to higher education, they are provided sufficient support to do that. And they are not deprived of that opportunity because they are not belonging to a certain strata socially, economically. So the needs of the connection in NEP is including inclusive education as well as equity in education. Now, if we coming to a bit detailed structure, then the NEP understanding, see, the policies earlier were also there in the education system, and the government policies were there that the education will be taken care of. But still, the huge gap, huge disparity is there. NEP is taken care of, and it has taken very seriously into these considerations. Which groups are lagging behind and they are not coming up to the normal accepted average level. And it is found that most gaps are there where SEDGs are present. SEDGs means socially, economically disadvantaged group. So these groups, among these groups, disparity is very high. So what comes under these groups? So females of all the categories come under this group. If we compare the male of all the categories, maybe SC, ST, OBC, physically challenged, learning disability, everything if we consider, females are generally at receiving end. They are not getting the due. Males get. So female disparity amongst the female becomes very high. Another group of people which is left behind is transgenders. Most of the time, they are not even counted as humans, and they are not allowed to enter the schools. A huge population is left behind. SC, ST, OBC, minorities. Even geographical identities, like people from villages, students from villages are not able to go to higher studies, and the rural small towns also. There is a huge gap between the city, modern city class, metro cities, and then coming to the average normal cities. There is a huge gap between them. Disabilities, physical as well as learning, both. This group is always at disparity. Then socioeconomic conditions also includes the community which is migrating. So migrant, their children are not able to get the education. Low income households where parents are not able to send the children. Children in vulnerable situation, children living in the high violence zones, they are not able to get the education. Victims of child trafficking, they are not able to get education. As well as the parents, the children of the parents who are affected because of trafficking, orphans, child beggars. All these are the groups which create and which are at the receiving end, not getting the proper education, are deprived of their child rights. Enrollment decline from grade 1 to 12 is everywhere, which is a concern. But again, significant decline is for this category of the people which I just mentioned. So education enrollment is not properly for them, as well as dropout rates will be more for these people. Now, what are the factors responsible for all this? There are many, but I am going to share only very few. First is lack of access to quality school. For example, if residing in a village, why the people are leaving the villages and coming to the big cities for the good quality education. So they are capable, they can spend money, but their school is not present in the nearby region. That is one reason. Poverty is another. Social norms and customs, like saying that in our families, girls do not study. After 10th, you will not go out from the home. And these are the social norms, which are again a reason for the dropouts. For girls, menstruation period, the moment menstruation starts, the girls drop out because of the lack of facility in the school. Language. Because in India, after every few miles, the language changes. And for people to understand all language, for children to understand, and for teachers to teach in their local language, it becomes quite a big problem. And that's why the children, either they do not enroll or they drop out very easily. Disadvantages are faced by the tribal children because of their historical and geographical factors also. And again, there is no connection between the education which we are giving to them and what in life they are facing. So no connect between their life experiences. Lack of resources and accessibility to school for children with special needs. And this is one huge area of concern, because large number, thousands of these people, these children are lost. They are not enrolled in our schools. And there are many more reasons. Now, what are the recommendations given in NEP? NEP says that, and realizes and understands the scientific research which says that 85% of brain development happens up to 6 years of the age. So NEP has decided to create a special curriculum, national curriculum and pedagogical framework for early childhood care and education, ECCE. And this will be developed by NCERT in two sub topics, sub areas, if I say. So for one is 0 to 3 years, where the more focus has to be on the diet of the children, because they are growing up. Malnutrition hinders their brain development. So initially, if they are taken care of, provided with healthy nutrition and all the healthcare facilities, vaccination and everything, at least their brain development will be good and normal. And the next part is for 3 to 8 years of the children. Now, all this curriculum development done by NCERT will be done by NCERT following the latest research, incorporating the best practices and Indian culture. This is the point which I really appreciate in NEP. Indian culture, Indian dance, music, art and craft, puppetry, everything will be included in this, where the local impact, because children live in various areas and it will not be a uniform kind of reference to be taken. It will be a reference to be taken from the local areas. So local language, local traditions, local festivals, everything will be included in the early childhood education. And how this will be implemented, the NEP has clear guideline for also that, because Anganwadis are the prime center which has the approach to younger children. And if we empower the Anganwadis, we make them, the Anganwadi Karyakartas, train them, we can educate them, then they can be the best resource to impart this. So through Anganwadis, training of workers, and all those pre-primary schools which are run haphazardly anywhere without any special guidance, and everything will come under this particular framework. And also, this is the schools which are not running pre-primary classes may be encouraged to run those pre-primary classes, because they are already having a lot of resource with them. So only with the help of teacher training, this can be done. Extending midday meal to these smaller kids also, which right now is between 1 to 5. But if we prepone it between 2.5 and onwards also, and can include them, then it will be quite impactful. Now for grades 1 and 12, how we can make all the students to come to the school, remain there, learn there, sustain there, grow there. There are certain measures given by NEP, targeted scholarships, conditional cash transfer for those parents who are not sending their children, especially the girl child, because she is forced to take care of the house or is forced to take to work at some other place. Providing transport, bicycle, This is very much important in those areas where girls especially have to go to a certain distance and the route is not considered safe. So if cycling is there, walking groups are arranged, then that route safety can be taken care of, and many girls will be going to the school. One on one, if the child is facing difficulty in understanding, then one-to-one intervention is needed. Peer tutoring, open schooling system, because there are children who have to work for their family and who have to earn bread for them, family members. So for them, if open schooling system is there, and that open schooling system should reach to those kind of children and help them. Appropriate infrastructure, providing technological intervention for children with special needs, that is essential. Quality ECC intervention. Counselors and well-trained social workers are needed who can pitch in and bring all those children who are left behind, bring them to the school. Geographical areas to be declared as special education zone. In fact, in cities also this can be done. For a particular area where children are not going, announce that area as, declare that area as a special education zone, and bring all the possible government funding, resources, corporate funding to that particular area so that the children from that particular area get benefited. Adding, creating gender inclusive fund. This is very important because we are not even treating the female gender properly in our schools. Forget about other genders. We are not even recognizing them. And that recognition is very much important. Establishing more girls' residential schools for the children, for the underprivileged section of the society, or where parents are not able to send.
Because of the time limit, though your thoughts are so useful, so valuable, we would like to have a dedicated session for your, but again,
So-
we have a time limit, so I would request, please take 1 more minute to conclude.
Just 1 minute and I am winding it up.
Please,
Okay.
please.
So not only this we discussed about grade 1 to 12. Now how this 12th class dropout can be reduced and they reach to the higher education. So government funding, clear target to be set for admissions, and the colleges need to conduct the outreach programs, inclusive admissions, and develop bridge courses, because the learning gaps, if they are there, because of that, the children are not able to do well in higher education. Thank you so much. And my apologies if I have taken too much of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Geeta ma'am. No, it was absolutely an honor to have these ideas, from a leader like you. You talked about the inclusion and absolutely, in last session, a principal from Asha School, Lucknow, participated, and she shared a very striking fact, disturbing fact. Rather, she said that Asar report don't include, the students from these special abilities, and they say that they don't have infrastructure, so they don't do that. I would say we don't have any data, formal data, for these students. So that is so disturbing to hear. You talked about, and it's again a very disturbing fact that dropout is highest among the students who are differentially able, and that number is effectively less than 4% who reach up to that higher, higher secondary education level. So that's again very disturbing, and we need to find some solutions. You also talked about that, many sections. You shared those sections, and you also shared the reasons why the students from those sections are completely out of formal education. Be it the kids from that bagging community, kids from you shared those different sections of society. You also talked about it. Many schools, there are many societal, social and infrastructure related reasons, for the exclusion of these students. And then you share the hope with the NEP, and you cited those areas from NEP, which are very positive. Be it ECC, the focus of NEP on ECC curriculum, or their attention and diet for those students. You also talked about the importance of empowering Anganwadis. Many speakers in the past session have also shared similar thoughts that this is going to be a remarkable effort if we do it properly. We also talked about the importance of targeted scholarships, conditional cash transfer kind of program, peer tutoring, and one very important thought which NEP is also talking about, a geographic reason centric special education zones. So how it would create an impact. We also talked about the need for various initiatives, like special girls' school and many other such initiatives. So we thank you, Geeta ma'am. These all were very useful thoughts. We are honored again. Thanks for participating. I'll come back to you with questions. Thank you, ma'am.
Welcome, sir.
And now I would invite Dr. Rajneesh Kern, sir. Let's have some ideas from higher education. Many educators who participated and shared that without connecting the higher education industry and school education, we are not going to get the desired fruits. This NEP, many people believe, has made a very serious attempt, in doing that. So let's have the ideas from the expert, from the authority. Rajneesh, sir, over to you.
Thank you, sir. What we see in that in present higher education system, there is a huge gap between the course curriculum and the industry requirement, which in turn increasing non-employability among youth of India. This new education policy has recommended few changes in this higher education, which is very much useful. So first of all, this national education policy has targeted that the gross enrollment ratio, which is currently in 2017-18, it was around 25%. This education policy has aimed to increase this gross enrollment ratio to 50% by 2035. And few more recommendations is first major recommendation in higher education is regulatory structure and accreditation. It has been noted that the current higher education system has multiple regulators with some overlapping mandates like AICTE and PCI, Pharmacy Council of India. Both are regulating pharmacy colleges in India, and there are some overlapping mandates. This reduces the autonomy of higher education institution and creates an environment of dependency and centralized decision making. Therefore, this policy proposes setting up the National Higher Education Regulatory Authority, which will supersede all these regulatory commissions. Means there will be no UGC, no AICTE, no Bar Council of India, and there will be a single regulatory commission that will be NHERA, National Higher Education Regulatory Authority. The second recommendation in higher education by in this new education policy is the role of NAAC. Currently, the National Assessment and Accreditation Council is an accreditation body under UGC, University Grants Commission. The draft policy recommends separating NAAC from the UGC into an independent and autonomous body. In this new role, this NAAC will function as the top level accreditor and will issue licenses to different accreditation institutions who will assess higher education institutions as once every 5 to 7 years. At this, all existing higher education institutions should be accredited by 2030. Means there will be a single accreditation council that will be NAAC, and all the higher education institution has to be compulsorily accredited by NAAC by 2030. The third recommendation by this higher education policy in higher education is the establishment of new higher education institution. Currently, higher education institution can only be set up by parliament or a state legislature. The draft policy proposes that these institutions could be allowed to be set up through a higher education institution charter from NHERA, means National Higher Education Regulatory Authority. This charter will be allowed on the basis of transparent assessment of certain specified criteria. All such newly constituted higher education institutions must receive accreditation as mandated by NHERA, means National Higher Education Regulatory Authority, within 5 years of being established. Next recommendation, which is the major recommendation, is that all the higher education institutions will be categorized in three major categories. One will be research universities, which will mainly focus on research and teaching. Second will be some teaching universities focusing primarily on teaching. And third, college focusing only on teaching at undergraduate level. In present education system, all the universities are doing all the things. Means they are teaching to undergraduate, postgraduate, doing also research work. So in such case, we say that uh, jack of all trades, master of nothing. Means the students studying in this higher education are not good in any particular. So government has decided that to categorize all the higher education in these three categories. Means few universities will be specialized for research. There will be more focus on research area, and there will be no undergraduate level teaching. A few universities will be on teaching only, and few universities will be for undergraduate level teaching. Moreover, establishing a national research foundation. It is also a very important recommendation in higher education by this in this new education policy. It was observed that the total investment on research and innovation in India has declined from 0.84% of GDP in 2008 to 0.69% in 2014. India also lags behind many nations in number of researchers when we say about per lakh population, patents, and publication. The draft policy recommends establishing a national research foundation and autonomous body for funding, monitoring, and building the capacity for quality research in India. The foundation will consist of 4 major divisions: sciences, technology, social science, and arts and humanities, with the provision to add additional divisions. The foundation will be provided with an annual grant of rupees 20,000 crores, means 0.1% of GDP. Similarly, next recommendation in higher education is moving towards a liberal approach. The draft policy recommends making undergraduate programs interdisciplinary by redesigning their curriculum to include a common core curriculum and 1 or 2 areas of specialization. Means there will be a multiple exit system in this higher education. Students will be required to choose an area of specialization as a major and an optional area as minor. And the degree courses will be not of 3 years, it will be of 4 years. Students will have facility to exit at after first year education, means after first year, after second year. In this 4-year undergraduate programs in liberal arts will be introduced, and multiple exit options with appropriate certification will be made available to students. Further, within this next 5 years, 5 Indian Institute of Liberal Arts will be set up as model in multidisciplinary liberal art institution. And similarly, another all recommendation is professional development of faculty. Means there will be policy committee observed that the poor service conditions and heavy teaching loads at higher education institutions have resulted in low faculty motivation. Further, lack of autonomy and no clear career program system are also major impediment to faculty motivation. The draft policy recommends development of a continuous professional development program and introduction of a permanent employment track system for faculty in all higher education institutions by 2030. Further, a desirable student-teacher ratio of more than 30:1 must be ensured, and there must be some optimal learning environment. The committee also observed that the curriculum remain rigid, narrow. So moreover, the faculty often lacks the autonomy of design curriculum, which negatively impact. It recommends that all higher education institutions must have complete autonomy on curricular and resource-related matters. These are the major recommendations in higher education in this new education policy. After this, I would like to conclude. This was all about.
Yeah. So thank you, Rajneesh sir, for sharing these, valuable insights from National Education Policy. You shared that NEP is giving and raising high hopes, but you also talked about the huge gap which is there between the academic content which we are offering to our learners and what actually industry demands. You also talked about the poor current status of DER and the target of 2035 that we will achieve that 85%, which many believe is very ambitious, but we all in collaboration should make our effort in reaching out to that. You also talked about various important initiatives in this NAP, be it National Higher Education Regulatory Authority, the unification of all the separate important elements of higher education. You also talked about the importance of establishing dedicated and separate institutions for research and for teaching and for different purposes. You also talked about the importance of continuous professional development programs and how it is going to create the impact. Big thanks, Rajnish sir, for sharing, for participating. I'll come back to you with questions, sir. Thank you. Now, with this, I would request our next key speaker, Anita Rathuri ma'am. Anita ji, if we can have your ideas, your thoughts.
Thank you. And see, my topic is inclusion and equity. So for that, I would love to share some of the slides, if you permit me, so that everybody can understand it in a easier way. So I have prepared some slides for this purpose, exclusively for this program. So if you permit, can I share?
Yes, sure, ma'am. You can do that.
Oh, thank you very much. Is it visible to all? I think yes.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So the topic is Every Child Matters, Inclusion and Equity in Education. So why do we need this inclusion and equity in education in new education policy 2020? For that, I would love to put forward some of the figures and then I'll begin with my slides. I won't take too much of time, but it's still in actually, though India has witnessed visible improvement in education, especially with regard to education infrastructure and students' enrollment in the recent years. In particular, the Right to Education Act 2009 has successfully managed to increase enrollment in the upper primary level from class 6 to 8. Actually, especially nationally between 2009 to 2016, the number of students in the upper primary level increased by 19.4%. Implementation of schemes of sanitation and safety have also helped sustain this enrollment in the country. The census 2011 recorded literacy of women at 65.5%. For Muslims, it had risen to 68.5%, and for scheduled caste communities, it had climbed to around 66%. Despite significant improvement in many crucial areas, Indian education system continue to grapple with challenges of inequality and exclusion. That is why we need this topic, inclusion and equity. Access to quality education in schools, it is still a dream for most rural populations and the vulnerable and marginalized group. So that is why here we are talking on this topic through your prestigious platform. So every child matters. Yes, actually it is fact. Every child matters. That's why we all are talking about all these things, a happy room, happy classroom, joyful learning, and child-centric education. That's why every child matters. That's why we are talking about these topics actually. So for this topic, we need to understand what is inclusion actually. Inclusive education actually is inclusive education in the broader terms essentially means providing education to all children with or without disabilities. People understand inclusive education only for the differently able children. No, it is for the with or without disabilities in the same general classroom. It looks at the strategic exploration towards elicitation of varied potential in all children who are diverse learners. In one classroom, we have diverse learners. So for all those diverse learners, we need this inclusive education. How could inclusive education help child remains as natural self? If we won't put the child in different environment, either the child is differently abled or transgender or comes from a different background or environment. We will put the child in same environment, in same classroom, that where the child will remain as natural self. He won't think himself a different one. And this system is least restrictive. No restriction will be there for the child. He will be behaving the same way as others are doing. Child centered. This inclusive education is child centered and equal opportunities for participation. All the children from all the background, from all the genders, from all the abilities and disabilities will be having the opportunity to take part in all the activities all together. Teacher effective in including all children in learning process. In learning process, it will improve the quality of the teaching also. Rights realized and actualized. Yes, every Indian has the same rights. So here in inclusive education, rights will be realized and actualized. And as you all are aware, that is most cost effective. Yes, we need not to set up different buildings for differently able children. We will keep them in same beautiful and joyful environment. Inclusion is not, do not misunderstood actually. Dumping kids with disabilities into general classroom without the supports and services they need to be successful. It doesn't mean that we will dump the children with disability in a simple classroom, in a general classroom, and we will not give them any service which they need to be successful. And inclusion is not sacrificing the education of kids without disabilities. So kids with disabilities can be included. So this is not inclusion actually. Let me make you more clear through this table actually. What is the traditional approach for the inclusion and what is present and what is inclusive approach? Here in traditional approach, education for some, and in inclusive education, in inclusive approach, education for all. It is static and rigid, but inclusive education, inclusive approach is flexible enough. Collective teaching, here individualized teaching. We will keep in view that the child needs this particular thing, will give the child the same thing. Learning in segregated setting, learning in natural environment. Child will not think himself a different one. Emphasizes on teaching. In traditional approach, we emphasizes only teaching, but here we emphasizes on learning. If there is no learning through the teaching, it cannot be called a teaching. This learning should be there. Subject oriented. Earlier, the traditional approach says this was only subject oriented. We need to keep in view that this subject I have to taught, and within duration during this time I need to finish the subject and syllabus. Child centered. Now the child is everything. All the importance is being given to the child. Opportunities limited by exclusion. We exclude the children actually with disabilities, with different genders actually, like transgender, I mean to say. Equalization of opportunities for all. Here, inclusive approach says equalization of opportunities for all. The opportunities will be given to all the children from either of the background, from either of the caste, creed, reason, colors, etc. Will give all the opportunity to all, will include to all in same environment, same joyful environment. I will again and again say joyful environment because I strongly feel that the environment of the classroom should be joyful and happy. Now, NEP 2020, what are the provisions? Inclusion and equity in education. Education for all. NEP 2020 attempts to address the growing inequality and inequity plaguing countries' education system today. Let me clear you people, clarify this thing. There's a little difference between equality and equity. Equality is typically defined as treating everyone the same and giving the access of all the opportunity to all the and the same opportunity to all. But equity refers to proportional representation on the basis of races, caste, creed, etc., etc. So NEP 2020 attempts to address the growing inequality and inequity plaguing countries' education system today. Even we are in 21st century, still the issues are there with our education system. So that's why this NEP is doing a little bit for that. The very first thing says socio-economic disadvantaged group. Who are the socio-economic disadvantaged group? As per NEP 2020, recognizes certain groups grossly underrepresented in the existing educational system. There are some groups which are not representing as they should in education system. So NEP focuses on that. NEP 2020 club gender identities, socio-cultural identities, geographical identities, disabilities, socio-economic conditions to create new social group called sets. NEP has created a new group that is socio-economic disadvantaged group. In that group, NEP puts gender identity, socio-cultural identity, geographical identity, disabilities, and socio-economic conditions to create new. So this is the new group. And NEP.
Just giving you just a polite reminder for the timing.
Oh yes, only two or three actually slides are left.
2 more minutes to conclude.
Yeah, only 2 minutes I need. This is, I think, the second last slide. And
Okay.
recommends a series of policies and schemes such as targeted scholarship, conditional cash transfer, as ma'am has told earlier, cash transfers to incentivize parents to send their children to school, to actually just save the children from the dropouts, providing bicycle for transport that have worked in the past to increase enrollment and to create more representations. So recognition of gendered identities. What is this? NEP 2020 recognize female and transgender individual as the worst affected people. Actually, let me put forward only one figure here. That is to illustrate as per the recent CBSE press release. Recent press release actually, there were 1,88,000, sorry, 1 crore 88 lakh 9,878 candidate in class 10 and 1 crore 20 lakh 6,893 candidate in class 12. Among the students who registered for class 10th exam, 7 lakh 88,195 were girls, 11 lakh 1,664 were boys, only 19 were transgender persons. So this is recognized by NEP 2020. Recognizes that transgenders and female individual as the worst affected people. Recognizes critical need of education for the girl child. Proposes the creation of gender inclusion fund to create better education spaces for women and transgender individuals. The fund will be initiate provision of sanitation, conditionals, cash transfer, bicycle distribution, etc. Recommends establishment of Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalayas to provide better boarding facility for students to tackle geographical barrier to education. Actually, NEP says all these things. It is format only. See what will happen when it will be implemented in 2023 or 24. Thank you very much. Actually, I have taken much time, so sorry for that. But without this much time, I was unable to express.
You understand that. You understand that. Thank you, Anita
Thank
ma'am,
you.
for these wonderful thoughts. You talked about the importance of why every child matters, and why we all know that you all recognize the importance of that. You also shared the challenges and solutions. You also talked about that classroom diversity. Now, many other educators have also said that it's just not the students who are differently able. There are many students who are so-called normal students, but they have different. They come from diverse backgrounds. They have different learning limitations and strengths. So we need to cater that as well. You also talked about your assessment that this NEP is a child-centric document. It is promoting individual-oriented education system. it is also offering a desired flexibility in terms of learning systems. We also talked about how NEP has focused upon the gender sensitization, and by giving a lot of initiatives, be it genders specific funds and many other such initiatives. Thank you, Anita ma'am, for sharing these wonderful thoughts. I'll come back to you with questions. Thank you, ma'am. Now, I would request our last speaker for this very special session, Reena Verma ma'am. Reena ma'am, if we can have your ideas, your thoughts.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very lucky that today I'm the part of this discussion. Matthew John sir, Gitika Shukla ma'am, you people are very expressive and raise a very nice points. Same Rajnish Khan sir and Anita Thori ma'am, you are fabulous by sharing the screen and all. It's really fabs. First of all, I want to say IIC is to give me a big platform to share my views. First of all, I would like to say that the importance of early childhood care national challenge is a challenge. As Indian, we all know that the literacy rate is very less. Literacy rate is very less. And as far as the rural areas are concerned, parents are less educated and they don't understand the importance of the the kindergarten education, or forget about the kindergarten education. They are not sending their children to the the related schools because of their earning the bread and butter and all. Even the government is providing so many things, even they are providing the midday meals, still the strength is very less. And if the students are coming, they are coming from the different age group and they don't know how to read and write. And it is very difficult for a teacher to deal with the different age group of the students in the same class. And it's a very big problem. The people, the primary school teachers,